You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Hey everybody, my name's Sean Reynolds. I'm the owner of Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds and Kline Appraisal, and your host of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Today we are talking about Seattle. We are talking about our progressive, tax-addicted leadership. Meaning we got a bunch of progressives in our office, in our city council, in our mayor, our government leadership in general, and they're taxing the heck out of Seattle. They're always looking for a tax. They've always got some big tax on big business, bunch of other taxes on small business, just tax during a pandemic. These people do not know how to run a business clearly, because if they had any clue whatsoever, they wouldn't be trying to tax business additionally. Let's throw out some more taxes during a pandemic. Instead of balancing their own budgets, instead of cutting back, let's tax successful business. Said no one ever who's run a business. That's kind of my standpoint. I'm over here in Bellevue. They're in Seattle. We're separated by a lake, but I'm the Seattle Real Estate Podcast, so I'm going to talk about it, and I talk about it a lot because there's a lot of people in business that are going, what is happening here in Seattle? This is crazy. And that's basically progressive leadership at this point in time, right? I mean, you look at what's happening with the homeless situation in Seattle, in Portland, in San Francisco, in a lot of California. It is crazy. So this progressive social experiment in leadership, how's that worked out? I'm doing podcasts on metal shops being established in homeless encampments on city-owned parkland that tax-paying citizens are supposed to be enjoying. And these homeless guys are running metal shops, big metal saws, band saws, making stuff at night. They've got a generator running. They're doing this stuff at night. What is city leadership doing here in Seattle? That's right. You got it. Nothing. They're actually defunding the Seattle police, and in doing so, they've basically defunded and they have put on hold the outreach program to the homeless. So what happens to the encampment sweeps? Nothing. That's just not going. We're not doing anything about that. We're progressive. We just want to let this situation stew a little bit more. We want some more homeless people to come in and impact the tax-paying citizens until the tax-paying citizens go, enough. And I'm one of those. And even though I don't live in Seattle, I don't have a business in Seattle. Seattle's kind of the flagship, right, for the Pacific Northwest. It really is. So when you talk about crazy things happening in Seattle, I take that personally because a lot of the real estate the Summit Properties Northwest sells is in Seattle. A lot of the appraisals we do are in Seattle because it's a big part of the population base in the Pacific Northwest. So I spend a lot of time in Seattle one way or another. And I've spent many, many years over there just running around, looking at homes, selling homes, doing stuff. And to see the way that Seattle has downwardly progressed, it's really annoying. And it's because of leadership. Let's be honest. It's not because of economic problems. We've got a crazy strong economy here. But you've got political leadership here that is so bad because they have never run a business. They've never balanced I don't think they've ever balanced a checkbook. They've never balanced a budget. They don't know how to run a payroll. They don't know what taxation actually does to a business, because if they did, they certainly wouldn't be doing this during a pandemic. And that's what we've got going on in Seattle. And why are so many people subscribing to this podcast? Because I'm a middle-aged white guy who owns a couple of businesses, and I am talking about what's happening in Seattle. And the rest of the media is finally kind of picking up. But there's so many of these news stories where people are like, oh, yeah, we kind of know that's happening, but we don't want to talk about that. Let's not address that problem. Oh, you stepped on a hypodermic needle, a used, dirty hypodermic needle? That's a problem, but somebody should get on that. Oh, you stepped in human feces in downtown Seattle? Oh, I mean, this sounds like San Francisco now, doesn't it? I mean, we've heard the stories about San Francisco for years. You're seeing that happen in Seattle. It's happening all the time. So today, I am actually reading from Fox Business. I don't read from Fox a lot because I feel like Fox kind of has to go so hard to the right to offset the rest of the media, which is just so left-based. It's so one-sided that I feel like Fox has to go too far to the right for a lot of my stuff. except for some business topics. And we've got one guy here in Seattle, and his name is Jason Rantz, and he does a really good job covering these topics and getting the word out there. And that's kind of all I'm doing. Is I'm a small business owner. My real estate brokerage, Summit Properties Northwest, we have, 110 agents that are brokers for Summit. I've got a small appraisal company. It's one of the oldest appraisal companies, residential appraisal companies in Seattle. We've been around since the early 70s. And I do the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. So we are heavily vested here. And one of my things is to get the word out of the nonsense that's going on in Seattle. And so this Fox article by Jason Rantz, it's an opinion piece. And I like opinion pieces because it's one person's opinion of what's going on. And that's all that this podcast really is, right? It's you guys listening to me. And while we're on that topic, hey, thank you for tuning in. We're literally getting like 300 subscribers a day right now, which doesn't sound like a lot. It might sound like a lot, but in our world, it's a lot. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing. The best thing you can do is give this video a like and share if you're on YouTube, or share on the podcast platform. So thanks again for tuning in, and I will try and make this as interesting as possible. But we've got a good one here today, and it's an opinion piece, like I said, and the title is Seattle's once booming economy will soon be demolished by city's tax-addicted progressives. Now, I kind of looked at that title and I thought, that is some good clickbait. You know what clickbait is? It's like a title that's too good to be true, or it's so exciting that you have no choice but to click on that. On YouTube, you have clickbait thumbnails, and it's usually a girl in a bikini. And it's a small bikini, let's be honest, and that's why you click on it. Let's see what this girl does in this video. I'll click. You don't really care what the title is. You don't really care what the content is. You've been clickbaited in. This title was good clickbait. But then the thing is you got to follow up good clickbait with content. And I thought this article had some really good points, and that's what we're going to read. But if I were to do this article, because I'm a small business owner and I need to be responsible in my own kind of staid, conservative real estate position, I would have titled this Seattle's booming economy instead of Seattle's once booming economy, because our economy here is still booming in Seattle, no doubt about it. Seattle's booming economy will be impacted by city's tax-addicted progressives. That's what I would have titled it, because I could live with myself on that one, but this one caught me. Jason, you're doing good work. Keep up the strong work. I'm going to read your article. All right. Seattle's once booming economy is struggling because of the coronavirus pandemic. This problem is not unique, but unlike other cities, Seattle's tax-addicted progressive leaders are recklessly increasing taxes at a time when businesses and individuals can least afford them. And this is where I go into the fact that our leadership doesn't know how to run a business, because if they did, if they had even a minute, tiny clue, they would realize this is not the time to be doing what they're doing, proposing taxation in a city that has businesses with the ability to go, bye-bye, guys, we're out of here. Thanks so much for your support up to this point. You guys kind of suck with your leadership now, so we're out of here. We're going to go over to Bellevue, where I am. And that's what's happening. So the tax-addicted progressive leadership will kill the Emerald City. I don't think it'll kill it, but it's certainly impacting it. It's impacting it right now. And here's an example of, I had a conversation with a great guy named Steve yesterday. Steve is a listener, maybe a viewer on YouTube, I'm not sure. He tunes into the podcast, and he called and said, hey, Sean, I've got this perspective. I'm out of Orange County, California. Just wanted to give you my perspective on Seattle. So I called him back, and we talked for, I don't know, a good half an hour, maybe longer, something along those lines. But Steve is like 2 weeks away from retirement. He's at a big company in Orange County, California. He deals with the travel industry, specifically putting on conventions and conferences. So he comes up to both Portland and Seattle about once a year. So he has said that he has progressively watched Seattle and Portland get worse and worse and worse, to the point where he can no longer recommend having conferences in either city. And he specifically said, trying to get down the sidewalk in these cities without stumbling over a homeless person or some garbage or just a real mess, because there's way worse than that going on. I mean, routinely you'll see hypodermic needles in downtown Seattle because of the opioid crisis, right? And our leadership is doing nothing about it. But Steve said, hey, honestly, I can't recommend doing a convention in your convention areas in downtown because it's so bad. And, I can't blame him. And the thing that he wanted me to reiterate was that has a trickle-down effect to all the businesses in a downtown core area. All of those sandwich shops, all of those bars, all of those mini marts, all of my beloved 7-Elevens, all of the other small businesses that succeed and are able to operate in a vibrant downtown economy, because it's a whole bunch of high rises with people working in them and a lot of people living in them. That is now fairly empty in downtown Seattle, not only because of the coronavirus, but because of our leadership and the inability to provide a safe, clean environment for people out of town to come in and do a conference. So Steve was saying basically this is a no-go for him. And I'll bring some other interesting topics that Steve gave me. But as far as this article goes and this conversation, his thing was like, yeah, Seattle's a no-go. And how many other businesses are going to be a no-go in the future? Because who wants to come to Seattle if you've just got this crazy messed up environment that if you have a choice to go, I don't know, anywhere else, that you will. You'll take your business anywhere else, especially a tourism kind of based environment. You don't want to have to deal with a whole bunch of homeless people roaming around. We had a what was it, a stabbing, I think, last week at 5 o'clock on 3rd Avenue. I mean, this just keeps going and going and going. And our city leadership is sitting back going, yeah, we're going to tax you guys some more. This is our solution. We're going to tax you. We're going to jumpstart Seattle with a tax. That is genius. I mean, the sheer geniusness of that as a business owner during a pandemic, knowing what's going on already, is just like, are you kidding me? And so it's this story that kind of got me to start podcasting on these topics, because let's be honest, this is an easy topic to podcast on. All I have to do is sit here and talk about basic business fundamentals, which our city leadership apparently knows nothing about, because they're going in a different direction. We're going to take it down this road over here. And the small business owners are going, what? What are you guys doing? What is happening? We've got a recall going on with one of our council leaders. We've had a recall going on our city mayor. I mean, it's not for people not noticing, but it's going to take a while. And so you're going to have guys like me talking about these issues for a while till this stuff starts to go way from the left to kind of lean it back a little bit more to the middle. So I'm a guy who's kind of pointing out the obvious. These stories just keep coming. I mean, the homelessness, the taxation, just the basic failure of the city of Seattle's leadership. That's what it is. Let's be honest. This social experiment has gone on long enough, and we kind of need to go in a different direction, and we're going to one way or the other, because like I said, this will impact Seattle's growth down the road. It will stop it, because businesses will be like, yep, we don't need to be there. We have other options. And that's where the city leadership right now is like, well, we're just going to tax you guys and you guys are going to take it. Guess what? They're not. And what's going to happen? We're going to read on. Far left Democrats are in total control of the city council and mayor's office. I don't know if I'd say total, but it's pretty bad. It's bad. It's bad. I got to admit there. Add the council's two socialists / Marxists into the mix. Socialism, Marxism, kind of the same. I mean, let's just throw them in there. It doesn't mix with business. How's that? All right. Into the mix. And Seattleites got used to reliably anti-business legislation. But then a pandemic hit, threatening the prolonged economic boom and the businesses they've used to bankroll city initiatives. You're killing the cash cow, guys. That's what you're doing. all the taxes that come in from these businesses, you're not going to be able to raise those taxes because you're going to be raising them on nobody. The big businesses are not going to stand for this nonsense because they have options. Just did another podcast on how Dropbox is leaving, or the issue with Dropbox in San Francisco is they've made permanent work from home employment, and by permanent they meant through, I think, June of 2021. So a lot of businesses are no longer stuck in a downtown core urban environment. And if you're a business that's being threatened with taxation that makes your profit margin less, guess what? You go elsewhere. You leave. You go to Austin, Texas, like Joe Rogan took his podcast, his between $100 and $200 million podcast. He said to city of New York, or the city of, or not city, but the state of California, yep, I'm out of here, guys. Enough. Done. Gone. So when Amazon announced the vast majority of its 60,000 Seattle-based employees would work remotely, the economic pain was immediate. Over 100 businesses in downtown Seattle have already closed permanently, with restaurants hit especially hard without a steady stream of Amazon employees coming in. All right, so that's kind of how it started off. You'd think these impacts would quell the urge to tax and spend. No such luck. The irredeemably left-wing council reacted swiftly with legislation dubiously titled Jumpstart Seattle. Its intent was to jumpstart the economy but fund housing and nebulously defined initiatives for communities of color. Nebulously, that's a good word to describe this. This was a nebulous decision. I'm not trying to be anti-racist. I'm not trying to be racist. Am I trying to be racist? No, I'm not trying to be racist by excluding communities of color, clearly, but the fact that during a time of a pandemic and you've got a budget shortfall, everybody's going to have to suffer. All of a sudden, we are trying to fund these initiatives for communities of color, and a lot of that had to do with stuff that went down in CHOP, right? That kind of put these things on the fast track. One of the things of CHOP were, if you don't know that, it's the Capitol Hill Occupy protest, formerly known as CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. But we didn't like the Autonomous Zone because that meant there was some independence there, and they didn't want to take full responsibility for that. But the Occupy protest, that they can work with. The three protesters / violent rioters' demands were defund the Seattle police by 50% - now. They wanted that done now, not later, now. Fund black-owned community businesses and that stuff. And then the third demand, and this is a big one, this is an important one, free all the protesters from jail. Because even though they've done some looting and they've broken and they have defaced businesses and they've broken into businesses and they've caused around $2 billion around the country in damage through insurance company claims, even though they've done that, we need to let them out of jail. So that was their third demand. Let the protesters out of jail. All right, so that's what they want. Yeah, so the whole tax Amazon, Jumpstart Seattle, is meant to kind of take care of that in a time where there's a massive budget shortfall, because guess what? You don't have the revenue from all these businesses because they were shut down. Another thing that should have never happened. You don't shut down the economy. You figure out a way to work through it and you keep on going. It's just, I can't believe as an adult we actually shut down the economy. That is such a crime. You keep going. You take the people who are in danger. You get them out of the way. Let everybody else figure out where their levels of comfort are. And you keep going. Because guess what? The economic impact, way worse than the actual impact from the coronavirus. Way worse. And we're seeing some of those numbers now. It's mind-boggling to me that we did that. The tiered payroll tax targets roughly 800 big businesses, though it was also a blatant attack on Amazon. When you go to CHOP or you go to any of these protests, there's always a hashtag tax Amazon, because that's what they want to do. We're going to steal from the rich and give to the poor. That's what we're doing, because we are a progressively run socialist city. That's what we do. Socialist City Councilwoman Kshama Sawant proudly calls it an Amazon tax. They just come right out and say it. We're gonna tax This is what we're doing. We're taxing big business, big successful business that does have options. Oh, you guys are leaving the city? How come? Why? Yeah, they got options. And Seattle isn't necessarily a great option right now. Socialist City Councilwoman Shama Sawant proudly calls it an Amazon tax. The council argued that the businesses that will pay the tax can afford it even in a pandemic. Does that mean that that's a good tax? So you're going to take businesses that have been really successful because their business model makes sense, and you're going to say, you guys can afford it. We're just going to tax the heck out of you. That's what we're doing here in Seattle. What do you think those businesses are doing? Yep, you got it. They're taking off. So the council previously targeted Amazon with a head tax in 2018. This was genius. At the time, Amazon successfully pushed back and threatened to end expansion in the city. This time, that's when we were around that whole headquarters 2 thing, right? You remember that? And they chose New York and New York City, and New York City said, we're not giving you the tax breaks you want. And Amazon said, that's fine, we're out of here. And you know what? They basically come right back full circle to Bellevue here. That's what's happened. Nobody really wants to talk about it. HQ2 is here in Bellevue, a few miles away from downtown Seattle. I think that's the funniest thing because I'm a Bellevue guy, but I'm also a Seattle guy, and I can see what's happening. It's literally happening just outside my door. Facebook just bought an enormous complex here that REI, the clothing and outdoor equipment manufacturer, retailer, they finished it up this summer, but due to the Rona, they're like, oh, our sales are kind of down. We got to sell it. Facebook is literally just down the road within walking distance of my office. They just bought up a corporate campus. You've got all of this stuff kind of going on, and it's benefiting my Seattle, my city of Bellevue. Seattle, you guys are just making bad choice after bad choice. All right. So at the time, Amazon successfully pushed back and threatened to end expansion in the city. This time on this tax, the Jumpstart Seattle tax, this time Amazon reacted swiftly. It announced it would shift 10,000 jobs to nearby Bellevue, Washington. Thank you, Amazon. And that's on top of 15,000 they previously promised. So we've got 25,000 jobs coming into Bellevue. 25,000. That's bigger than a lot of small towns, and those are just Amazon people. And guess what? That has the trickle-down effect of bringing in how many other jobs per each of those jobs? Yeah. Bad choices, Seattle. You guys aren't good at business. You're good at progressively leading a city into decline, but you're not good at business. They also declined, this is Amazon, they also declined to renew a 180,000 square foot office lease in the heart of Seattle. I did a podcast on that. It's just one more kind of nail in the coffin of Amazon being in downtown Seattle. They're just like, yeah, enough of you guys. We've had enough. We're going to go where people want us, where we're welcome, where people have business ideas that are actually progressive and allow businesses to grow and expand. And more importantly, they don't tax them during a pandemic. That's a no-go. That's a no-go. You guys are morons for even suggesting that. But Seattle city leaders weren't done with legislation. Over objections from rideshare companies, Mayor Jenny Durkan and the council established a $16.39 minimum wage standard for Uber and Lyft drivers. This was on top of 2 previous tax hikes of 75 cents per ride. In a statement, a spokesman for Lyft predicted the deeply flawed legislation will push them out of Seattle. And I think, was it Lyft or maybe it was both Uber and Lyft, because I think they both operate as independent contractors with their employees. I think it was California. Was it the whole state of California? They had to have a reading of whether those people were actually independent contractors or employees. And if they were deemed employees, Uber was basically going to shut down. I think Lyft was as well. Something along those lines. So these are companies that... with the minimum wage, you are monkeying with somebody's business because you can't figure out your own budgets. That's what's going on. Seattle isn't business friendly, and it's getting worse. The local 130-year-old Bartell Drugs announced a sale to out-of-state Rite Aid. CEO Kathy Lynch complained of business taxes rising, plus COVID, making operations financially untenable. Bartell Drugs has been in the Pacific Northwest literally 130 years. It's a great store. It's it's like a small chain that when you walk in there, you're like, oh, yeah, okay. This isn't as big and as corporate as a Rite Aid. So it was kind of sad to see it get sold to Rite Aid. And we all know Bartell Drugs is local. It's been a local family-owned business forever. But they're at that point in their careers where they're like, yeah, we're heavy in Seattle, and guess what? We can't really make a go of it. So maybe Rite Aid, with their big corporate backing, maybe they can ride it out. They can absorb us, and they'll have a better way of dealing with all this nonsense. But yeah, having to sell out because of business taxes and COVID, making operations financially untenable. Untenable, that's a good word too. All right, similarly, Seattle's iconic Elephant Car Wash is shuddering over the ever-increasing cost of doing business in Seattle and the city's ever-increasing burdensome regulatory demands. The Elephant Car Wash is kind of an iconic Seattle structure. It's got this big, huge elephant, which is right down, I think it's on Denny Way in downtown Seattle. But if you've ever been through downtown Seattle, you've seen the big Elephant Car Wash. So it's local, it's well known, it's shutting down. And they basically come right out and said, yeah, we can't deal with all this nonsense. This is a no-go. So the Washington State Legislature is making matters worse. Democrats passed a new statewide real estate excise tax. It replaced a flat rate with a tiered structure that makes buying and selling large properties even more financially onerous. Did a podcast on that, and yes, it does, but it leaves most of the tax brackets, excise tax brackets, not income tax brackets, it leaves most of them the same or maybe a little bit less on the low end, but the upper end, yeah, it kind of hammers on them. So let's just keep taxing the rich because, man, they're successful and they deserve it. I mean, that's how business goes, right? Steal from the rich, give to the poor. Plus, in 2021, businesses may be hit with a 700% increase in unemployment tax rates to fill a depleted unemployment fund. In 2022, there's a 0.58% wage tax to fund a new financial assistance program. More tax announcements are expected in the next legislative session. All right, that's cool. Yeah, 700% increase in unemployment tax rates. I'm not sure where that number comes from. I could hit the hyperlink, but basically I didn't do my homework before I read this article, but I didn't look at all the links. I didn't look at that one. But I mean, bottom line is how many people have been let go and how many have had to claim unemployment or unemployment situation due to the Rona. I mean, we're going to need bailout after bailout. Not just the one bailout that's going on in right now, but there's going to be a lot of struggle. And when you shut down an economy, guess what? You're going to have to deal with things like an increase in unemployment tax. And that's why it's just not a great time to be doing taxation during the Rona. The bigger Seattle businesses are adapting to save money, but the moves won't save the city. Seattle-based Starbucks joined Amazon and Facebook in extending their remote workforce into 2021. The arrangement may continue indefinitely as businesses see increased productivity and job satisfaction with a work-from-home model. I don't agree with all that, but let's just say that was true. Okay, so that's going to hammer on downtown Seattle even more. But as an added incentive, the new payroll tax doesn't apply to employees who work both from home and at least 50% of the time and live outside of Seattle. What are you going to do? Do you work 50% of the time outside of the Seattle? Yes, I do. I do. Yes. Yes, I do. If the trend is flexible, work from home schedules, the effect will have serious implications. I think it already has. If you don't need to live near the office to avoid a brutal commute, why would you live in pricey Seattle? That's a really good question. You get significantly larger homes at a fraction of the price within 20 to 30 minutes of the city. Plus, you won't have to deal with Seattle's worsening homelessness and crime. Worsening homelessness and crime, that is true. But I think most people are realistic enough to know that the 20 to 30 minutes of the city, the 20 to 30 minute drive in the city, that right now is because of the less traffic with coronavirus. And eventually that will go back to the point where it is, and sorry, I'm looking now, but I lost my place here again in the article. But I think that people will recognize that that 20 to 30 minute commute, that's more like an hour and a half with bad traffic. Maybe it's not an hour and maybe it's an hour and 15. That 20-minute commute is an hour and 15 in bad traffic. And eventually we're going to get back there. Are we all working from home forever? No, I don't think so. Will traffic be less than it once was? Yeah. And maybe it makes being able to move out just a little bit further, get a little bit more house, maybe it makes that just a little bit more affordable and ideal for the average home buyer, because we are certainly seeing people move out to the suburbs, not in droves, but people are just moving around in general. These low interest rates, they're like, all right, rates are super low. It's time to move. We need a little bit more house, or we need this, or we need this, or we no longer have to commute in all the time. So I'm going to be able to take that that brutal commute, only do it a couple of times a week. That's what's happening right now. And I see that on a daily basis on the summer properties northwest side. So we're selling homes to people. So I see that. I don't see the enormous exodus from the downtown core. I see that as being a slow trickle of people, definitely an out-migration, but not a mass exodus. And if you want to get a good deal on a condo, buy one in downtown right now. Buy one in any of the major cities, because I think those will come back. If the work-from-home model is truly more efficient, then there's also fewer reason for businesses to buy large properties. Yeah, so commercial real estate going to be impacted here, right? It already is. This will further cool the commercial real estate industry. And when people move out of the city, there will be a lot of empty, newly built apartments, but that's not all. Many restaurants, coffee shops, and boutique retailers owe their very existence to big employers providing a customer base. If they don't return, these businesses struggle and eventually close. That also hits local suppliers. That's the trickle-down effect of all the people that Seattle City leadership isn't recognizing within these numbers. If they are, they're being pretty quiet about it, and they're not doing anything. So either way, I'm not okay with what's going on. What's worse, the city has shown no willingness to curb spending. That means the middle class will eventually pay higher taxes to keep up with city spending. That is what's going on. That in turn can push them out of Seattle for a more tax-friendly city. So our taxes here still aren't bad. We don't have a state income tax. Our property taxes aren't crazy to the point where it's like, oh, that's just wild. Why would you live there? They're expensive, but as far as big cities go, they're not crazy over the top. And here is the final ending comment that I don't agree with, but I understand why Jason's making the point, the article author. And I just did a podcast on it yesterday. And it ends with, and just like that, the once booming Seattle, desperate to be seen as world class, becomes Detroit. I think this is a dramatic effect, and I think we know that isn't the case. And I went through probably a dozen reasons why Seattle won't become the next Detroit, and it's basically to do with the employment base here. We're not dependent upon one industry. We've got a whole bunch, and we're on the upswing, whereas Detroit's been on the downswing since the 1950s. And so we're not going to become Detroit. That's not happening. But the Seattle that we once knew, the Seattle that I grew up in, is wildly different. The Seattle that Steve from Orange County has been up here and visited and probably enjoyed visiting over the years, because who doesn't want to get out and see a new city, especially a city as pretty as Portland and a city as pretty as Seattle, which right now, they're pretty grungy. Not just due to grunge here in Seattle, but they're grungy. They're nasty. You don't want to walk on the sidewalk. You have a daughter or a wife, girlfriend, yeah, you don't walk around with them in these areas. Not good. It's not safe. So no, I don't think we'll become Detroit, but this ending makes it become more dramatic. And I think it hammers home a point that cities do come and go. They have ebb and flow. And so if you as city leadership have the ability to look at your budget, make some cuts, and maybe not tax businesses that are kind of already struggling, or the big businesses that have options to go elsewhere, then maybe that's what you need to look at. Maybe you need to look at some alternatives to how you're doing leadership right now, because guess what? It is not working. Not happening, folks. Not happening. But the flip side to that is that is the leadership that the city of Seattle has voted into office. So citizens of Seattle, good luck with your leaders. I'm going to keep reporting on it, though, because it's a pretty easy topic for me to report on. The ridiculous stuff coming out of Seattle, it's just so wild. It's one story after another. And as those come out, I'm going to cover it because people all over the country are looking at Seattle and Portland and going, what's wrong with you guys? You guys are just, there's something wrong with you. And there is. We got a lot of problems. But as they come up, I'm going to cover them because that's what I do. Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Thank you for tuning into another episode. Again, I'm Sean Reynolds from Summer Properties Northwest, Reynolds and Kline Appraisal. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.